Hello, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of The Business of YouTube. Today we talk about sports again, but a lot about digital and sport. We have a very special guest today. I've known her for a while. It's a her, so it's good to always have more women in the podcast. And we're going to talk about her career, where the future is going about sports, digital. Welcome to the stage, Bindi Ghai, VP Content Partnership at IMG. Hello, Bindi.
Hi, Paula. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So good to have you here.
Great to be here.
All right. So we have known each other for a while, and I'm very happy to talk with you because I think you have definitely a long history with digital platforms, sports, and we crossed the path in many different ways. So I'm really looking forward to know more about your view about it, and especially about the future. But let's start from the past. So what's the story? What's your journey up to now?
Yeah, where's the start? So I started my career in digital advertising. So long time ago. My first job was at Microsoft Advertising, and in that role, I started off very much at the bottom, if you like, where I was kind of processing IOs, invoices for clients, but it gave me a good understanding of advertising and the different formats and how they're booked. And so, that's where I started my career. I was at Microsoft for about 5 years as an account manager. And I think in that role as an account manager, it really helped me understand how advertising clients buy media, how to manage them, how to report. Analytics and data was a very core part of that role. And I think it really helped me create that foundation of understanding digital analytics and data within advertising. So I was there for 5 years. I worked across a number of media agencies, a number of clients. Towards the end, I was working with a lot of film clients in entertainment. So 20th Century Fox were my main client, and we were delivering campaigns across territories for them whenever movies released. Back in the day of homepage takeovers, if anyone remembers those, that's very.
I do.
Yeah, 300 by 250s, 728 by 90s. That was my day to day. So when I was at Microsoft, Twitter, when it was called Twitter, were just launching their international offices, London being the first one. And I was lucky enough to be asked to join that team, a very small team of 6 salespeople. And again, in that account management role where I was very much building what that account management structure looked like for Twitter internationally. It was really exciting. Twitter was a new platform. Lots of people wanted to know more about it. And I think this was my first foray into sports, really. Sports and Twitter, it's such a big platform for it, especially live sports. And so I was working with a number of brands that wanted to advertise around big sporting events, Champions League, World Cups, Olympics, etc. And the nature of Twitter being very live and in the moment, it really allowed me to understand a new way that advertisers were buying inventory across sports. Twitter, I was there for 5 years. It was a great place to be, growing platform, but very startup culture mentality where your job title might be one thing, but you're very much doing a lot of things. And I loved that. I loved that kind of.
Well, I guess that the job title doesn't really matter, does it?
No, it never has.
I always like the fact that you could be called even bananas, apples, and oranges. It doesn't really matter.
It doesn't matter, no. And for people watching, I very much agree with. You're given a job title, but ultimately it's what you make of the job and the experiences that you have, how you manage it, that really helps your career. So I was at Twitter for 5 years, 3 of those years working in the ad sales team again. But as I'm originally from Kenya, I started to notice that the platform was gaining a lot of traction in Africa. And so I kind of pivoted my role more into the partnerships team, working on Africa, that big continent, but very much focusing on Kenya, South Africa, and Nigeria, and how we grow the platform in those markets across news, sports, entertainment. So working with a lot of organizations in those markets. So yeah, I moved to Twitter. And then after Twitter, I was at Pinterest, a very different type of tech platform, but still a tech platform. And a lot of my work at Pinterest was around content partnerships with big media organizations that could distribute their content onto Pinterest, and really working with them on more of the tech API side of content ingestion, how the algorithm works, understanding a lot more around the tech side of the platform. So fast forward to 3 years ago, I joined IMG, and I joined as the VP of Digital Commercial within the digital team. And for me, that was very much the beginning of, I think, the sports industry really looking at digital as a way of not only marketing, but also commercializing their assets. And I think my experience at, Microsoft, Twitter, Pinterest, especially in that advertising space, has just meant that we can support rights holders in lots of different areas around digital, but taking the experiences I have from the tech platforms to really help rights holders across those platforms, but also understand their own power within digital, or kind of their own importance around digital.
Yeah, and you really need to understand every single platform and understand the why behind everything. So it's not one fits all.
No,
Ever. It's really
definitely
like
not one
why
fits all.
should be here and there and not there, like whatever is the purpose that it serves. You need to be very intentional on where you are for what reason. So I think
100%.
that he definitely brought like all of the wide kind of knowledge of the platform and digital in that.
Yeah, for sure. And when I was on the platform side, it was definitely something that we educated a lot of our clients on, in terms of why you should be on Twitter, why you should be on Pinterest. And to your point, it's a very different need. And I think here I'm able to advise rights holders on what's the right platform strategy, why do you need to be on those platforms. But ultimately, we want to support rights holders in generating revenue from these platforms, because I think that's a really big piece of the sports industry that we're kind of moving into.
But now you embrace sports 100%. So you've been touching points with sports before, but what's the key learning since you joined IMG, where like it's really day in, day out is about sports and platforms, but from the other side, what's the key learning? So I'm very curious about that.
Yeah, I mean, I know a lot of people say this, but I've never stopped learning since being at IMG. I think, for me, it's been a very great space to learn about the sports industry whilst also working on it. I think one of the biggest things that I've learned within sports is just how complex the industry is, how many different stakeholders there are within any organization. It really, when I was at the platform side, we're very specific about speaking to clients about one thing that they wanted to do on Twitter, and that was it. Whereas, for me, what I love about being at IMG is that we get very close to a client's business. We really start to understand, open the bonnet and look at all their areas of the organization, the business, and really start to understand how we can impact their growth, their revenue, their IP, their brand, and really help support them in those different areas. So, the biggest learning for me is just how complex it is. It's not, as straightforward as just do less of this, do more of that, and that's what will happen. Everything impacts each other within a business. And that's been, the biggest learning curve for me since joining IMG.
Yeah, you get closer to decision making and actually strategy, like as 360, which is actually very interesting, because then you could be really highly impactful.
It is. It is. And my experience from working with brands is I have a lens of looking at a rights holder as a brand, but ultimately how they perform on the pitch is so important to everything else, and you can't discount that. So it has to work, in partnership with each other. You have to perform on the pitch, but also that impacts what you can do from a commercial and marketing perspective.
And from given that you have like the whole digital knowledge, the behind the scenes that actually then works for working in the sport industry from a business perspective, then like where do you see the opportunity for growth from a digital point of view for the rights holders?
Yeah, I see, so much opportunity, as I'm sure lots of people do. I think, with digital, what we've seen happen over the last 5-10 years is a lot of platforms come into play, really important platforms. Consumption habits are changing. The way that people engage with rights holders is changing. And so I think, the challenge for a lot of rights holders is this kind of breadth of platforms that you need to be on. Fans are global now. You need to engage with them in different ways. But I do see that as a huge opportunity for IMG, I think, who are perfectly placed to support rights holders in this ever-changing landscape of digital. But, I think the main thing for me is that live sports, but in particular, it holds this premium nature to it. Fans engage with sports in a different ways where they're so loyal that they'll keep coming back. And I think it's understanding that dichotomy or that kind of relationship around fans and sports and digital, where there is attention to view in some areas, but there's also the passive viewing that we need to think about when it comes to rights holders and how we continue to engage fans in this ecosystem where you're not only in competition with other sports, you're in competition with entertainment, you're in competition with new types of entertainment. That's really where I see the future of digital. Like, it's so big, but I think there's so much opportunity for rights holders where, and I'm generalizing here, I think they haven't really progressed as much as they can, and there's so much opportunity for them to do that.
And talking about data, which definitely we have in common, like, we are very much data geek. We could speak about that like for 24 hours about whatever number and whatever the reason behind the number, what it could look like in 3 years from now. What is the kind of KPI or data that you think is very going to be important, not just now, but for the future, that every executive should look at?
Yeah, data is such a. Do you remember when they were saying data is the new oil? Really, it's there's so much data. There's so much data available. There's so much you can do with data, and I think the key message for me is, what's the so what? Like, what do you do with that data? I think is really important and can help you understand then what is the data that we need to be understanding more of. And I think, in my role and selfishly, when I think about brands, and again, that experience I had of platforms monetize the behavior of audiences on their platforms for brands. And I think rights holders need to start thinking more about their fans and the data around the fans, but more so from a brand's perspective of, what is it about our audiences that we can really leverage when it comes to brand partnerships across digital? How can we, as rights holders, act more like media companies in that we have this wealth of audience data, we have this wealth of content data, and ultimately, how can we monetize that through brands? So, there's so many different data points that a rights holder can look at. But for me, the key question is, what do you do with that data? And, coming from an advertising perspective, this is where it's really key that you start to understand more about how your fans engage with you, who those fans are, what's their behavior online, so that you can go to a brand and say, this is the audience that we have, this is the audience that you want to advertise against, and kind of enable that to happen.
And do you see that happening a lot, like from 0 to 100?
Yeah, it's a slow process. There are a number of rights holders that do it now. They're very aware of the data. I'd say North American rights holders are probably more advanced than a lot of others. But this is where we come in. This is where I think the work that we're doing at IMG, the projects that I'm leading on, is very much matching that data to brands and helping you commercialize it. But also, there's a halo effect around it. You can benefit from that brand partnership because it ultimately helps you grow your engagements and your brands. It's kind of this self-fulfilling circle. But I think rights holders, some of them are still very much looking at followers as the main, data metric when it comes to brand partnerships. But I just don't think that's, it helps in some ways, but ultimately it's what you do with those followers and how you monetize them that I think is the key data point.
Yeah, on that point, actually, I think there's a good lesson from the creator economy because, well, it's a bit of a vanity metric, subscribers and viewership altogether, although it does count because it gives you a signal.
Of
It's a
course, yeah.
signal. But one thing I see more and more is like from the creator economy, you don't need to be Mr. Beast. I mean, there's one Mr. Beast, so there's one WWE, and that's it. But the point is, even if you're small, the depth of that following
Yeah.
is giving you an extreme power. So it's not really like, okay, you don't need to be like 100 million followers. You might have 1 million, you might even have 500,000.
Yeah.
But if those followers are really into your content and it's a real community, it's super strong. Actually, you can do so much more than being 10 times bigger, but not very committed. So I think that there is a lot that could be done from a rights holder perspective, and especially from up and coming sports, more niche sports. I mean, some sports actually grew because of digital platforms, because of actually like being more there and creating
Yeah.
more of the community side of it.
Totally, like quantity over quality. That's really the key messaging around that digital data and the audiences. I think, again, back to that point around sports, is that what they have that I don't think many other of these competitors we think about is that you've got these loyal fans who will keep coming back, and it's really leveraging that, but understanding more about your fans' behavior that you can then transform into kind of, brand packages that they then advertise against. That's really key. And then, from the brand's perspective, it means less wasted media. You're really targeting the right audience, the right segment, and driving that conversion or awareness or consideration funnel that you have as a brand. That's really key.
And do you have any example of some rights holder who are definitely leveraging data and they're very like forward-looking in the digital space? Any
Yeah,
good examples? It's always good to learn who's doing
yeah.
well.
Yeah, I mean, I've got two examples, one in kind of the brand space, but one also in the audience growth side of things. As YouTube is such a great platform, so they're two rights holders that have used YouTube particularly well, I think. And IMG, now part of TKO, this premium sports marketing agency, UFC, which is one of the rights holders that sits under TKO. I think they've been an amazing example of how to do digital from a rights holder perspective in many different ways. They have been very, they've been first to go to platforms a lot of the time. They've been on YouTube for a while, and having consistent content published to a platform and kind of consistent resource allocated to that has really helped them grow that YouTube presence. And as a result, I think because of the monetization capabilities on YouTube, they're now reaping the benefits of having done that work. And I think they use YouTube in a great way when it comes to engagement, but also monetization. They are, enabling sponsor activations across YouTube, and they've been a really great case study for that. I think another area where UFC have really excelled in the digital space is really looking at their athletes first and their digital presence first. We know from a lot of research that a lot of the younger generations are following athletes as opposed to the league or the club or the federation. And I think UFC have been great at building the profiles of their athletes to just help with their overall growth. So I definitely put UFC as one who is a really forward thinking in that digital space. Back to that question about what I've learned, there's not this unlimited bucket of resource that, rights holders have. And I think they've got to really be purposeful about how they go about growth. But it's challenging, who knows what the next TikTok is going to be or the next Snapchat. And you always have to have your eye on it. But at the same time, I think you've got to be quite conscious about how you allocate resource to platforms based on the return that you're going to get from that platform.
And also, going back to your data points, I think by leveraging the platforms, you can actually try a bit and get the comment through the comments or through the response. Anyway, you get immediate response in a way. So
Yeah.
ultimately, you can actually change the product or change the direction as well in partnership with the brands based on the immediate response of the community. So I think there is a lot that could be done as well on that front. And if you're an up and coming sport,
Yeah,
that is, you have also a bit more freedom to test and try,
you
which I
do.
mean, in platforms, that's what you need to do in reality, because the more rules you have, the less you can try, of course, and the more you are up and coming, and the more you can actually be creative, which is more fun from one side, but also, I mean, it's like the constraint of like you need
Yeah,
to grow, but you might not have the same budgets as other sports. But platforms are very giving you immediate response, and you can actually change on the go. You don't
you
need to
can.
wait
Yeah,
full season. You can completely change the direction. Well, if not completely, you can definitely change the direction anyway,
yeah.
and,
Okay.
and make the audience and the community actually be part of that decision making in a way. Like they feel part of, okay, we really want something slightly different, and then it's happening. It's like they own it in a way, and that's
Yeah,
powerful at the end.
it's very powerful, and I think that's the value exchange rights holders can give their fans. We always talk about this Venn diagram of rights holders, fans, brands, and that middle bit is the holy grail you want to be in. Again, back to brands. When we're thinking about digital, this is really where we see a lot of the value being given back to fans as part of brand partnerships. But to your point, rights holders can get this immediate feedback from their fans around the content. I think rights holders, when it comes to digital, when it comes to content, they need to think of themselves more as brands. I don't think enough of them really spend enough time really thinking about their brand economy and what does the IP mean to a lot of their fans when it comes to these digital channels, as you would a B2C brand, like how Nike or Adidas are thinking about their customers. I think that's what rights holders need to do more of on digital. Yeah.
Embrace change and embrace like a bit of bravery, which
Yeah,
it's scary. I mean, I understand that's great, but it could be fun as well and very rewarding.
it can be, but I think rights holders have this tightrope they need to balance for sure in terms of where they're seeing the most return, where is the opportunities for audience growth, and I think again at IMG we have such a wide variety of services that kind of complement each other in the space, but also really that kind of global to local for a rights holder is really important. You are these global brands, but you need to understand how to engage with fans locally, down to the type of content, the type of audiences, what do they like, what's engaging well.
It's definitely a complex business, that's for sure.
Yeah, it is, but it really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It is. Now let's move forward and let's look at the future, like a very not very distant future. So let's look at the next 12 to 24 months, because I think that a lot is happening, and I think that whatever is above 3 years mark is like very hard to say. So what is from your point of view, like a trend or something that needs to be looked
Yeah.
at very closely in the next 5 to 24 months, something that should be interesting to look at and take an action eventually,
Yeah.
from your point of view?
I think for me, again, back to my role here and what I'm doing here is I just think brands as revenue sources for rights holders is going to become more and more important. And we're seeing this at a very macro level where your platforms like Netflix and Amazon are coming in to bid for live rights. And ultimately, the way that they fund those rights is through advertising. It's through brands wanting to spend on that content. Yes, there's an element of subscription also included, but I just think, that whole brand economy, that whole the interaction between brands and media platforms and rights holders is going to become an ecosystem, and creators, as you mentioned, that we're going to start seeing a lot more of in the next 2 to 3 years. I mean, recently we just saw in Brazil, Cazé TV has taken on the rights for the World Cup next year. And so again, that Venn diagram of brands, rights holders, fans, creators, rights, that's an area that's going to become really, really interesting. And again, I think, for a rights holder, when they're thinking about sponsorship and commercial partners, it's how do we start to include digital packages in these? Because I think it just sets them up so well for the future, where we know that digital is growing. We know that in some areas, traditional rights fees are declining. And I think this is just the balance that's starting to shift. And I do think in the next, 2 to 3 years, we're going to see a lot more brands becoming the main source of revenue for a lot of rights holders.
Interesting. Let's see, like maybe in 12 to 24 months, we do another interview and we see like where we are with it. And then we see the next 12 to 24 months, if we're doing well or like needs to accelerate.
Yeah.
But definitely a lot is going to be changing, and it's going to be interesting to see how, from a business perspective, and then there's going to be like decision making to be made. And I think the opportunities are going to come out of it. And usually like it's where creativity comes in place as well. Like, okay, how do you figure it out? And where you can build value, because there's a lot of value still to be created.
Definitely. And just off the back of it, we talked about how UFC have really leveraged their athletes in terms of that audience growth. And I think another thing we're going to see, and we've already started to see, is just how important the athletes are in terms of growing the sport. And so I don't see a very far, or I see a near future where athletes are actually distributing live rights through their own channels. I mean, we've seen Ronaldo do it with paddle in the Middle East, but I just think that is going to become a more and more a kind of a distribution method for a lot of rights holders.
Well, I was very surprised that athletes are not so much on social, at least on YouTube. They are on social media. They are very much on Instagram, most of them. Some on TikTok, on YouTube, not much. Up to when Cristiano Ronaldo then started. And then it was like, okay, why athletes are not there for real? So it was kind of a wake-up call. It's like there's like a new way to become a media. More like very much of a video media compared to other platforms. So I think that's going to take a while, but athletes definitely have a lot of space there to play, and they're already very active on social media anyway.
They're very active, yeah. And I think the other platforms have made it very easy for athletes to just create content, whereas I think YouTube. Generally a lot of people think a bit about long form content and it being a bit more produced than just taking like a video on your phone. I know, shorts is a new way of doing that, but yeah, slowly and surely, I think a lot more athletes are going to start thinking about YouTube and the importance.
Yeah, I'm curious to see where it's going to be like in a couple of years, because it's really not there yet, and that's very much a very big area for growth, and also for rights holders then to do it together with the athletes, like you're saying, the example. I don't think there are many examples like that. I think it's very unique.
It is very unique, but again, back to what I've been learning, it's complex because an athlete is a creator, but also the athlete is contracted to the club or the federation or the league, and so I think it's just understanding what that ecosystem looks like and how who owns the rights, etc. There's a lot of that to work through.
Yeah, and I guess as well, like in the near future, especially the younger athletes that are like that, they are born on social media very much. Then probably that's going to be changing the legal framework as well. Like they're going to be probably contracted in both sides in a different way than other athletes that are more like established now that they are starting the whole social media journey, or like they're more established on some platforms rather than others.
And then, as you talk about this, AI is going to change a lot of how this is, not only the efficiencies around it, but also the protection around content. And so I think for athletes, whilst a lot of the younger athletes are born digital first, there is an element where we've got to understand and we've got to think about the tools that protect their IP also when it comes to AI, deepfakes, generative content.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, very last question. Not very much about numbers, or at least it might be, but not necessarily. So, what are you most proud of? Like, very open, like up to you now.
That's a big question. What am I most proud of? I think I've been most proud of really working at companies where I've really enjoyed the job that I do. You know, people always talk about it's not a job if you love what you do or something like that. And don't get me wrong, they've been very challenging roles, but I've always really loved the companies I've worked at, and it's interviews like this where it allows me to kind of look back on where I've come from to where I've got to. And I think for me, I'm just proud of working for really great companies that are doing really innovative, great things within the industry that I can say I was a part of that. So, you know, at Microsoft, it was very much, you know, the start of that programmatic advertising landscape and, you know, being at the forefront of that. You know, I was part of that ad sales team. It was amazing. Twitter, Pinterest. And I think, you know, within the sports industry and where we are right now, we talked about there's this real shift in consumption. There's a real shift in the way that people are engaging with sports content. You know, being at IMG and being a leader in that space where it is, you know, we're seeing that change, but we're also being able to impact what that change is. I think that's I've just been really proud at working at places that are at the forefront of where the industry is for that, you know, for that specific company. It's a bit of, I don't know, I feel like it's an answer that's not really, I don't know, I don't want it to sound as if like, I, you know, forced that I've loved, you know, working at these companies, but genuinely now I look back and I just think they've been really great companies to work at.
Well, there's a pattern there anyway. Like you went from platform to platform, so you definitely love platforms. That's for sure. And then of course, like at IMG, you just embrace them all in a different capacity. But I know what you're talking about because although like we have never been in the same platform, but the approach is the same. It's like you're a builder at core, and you just keep building in a very positive ecosystem, very challenging because you need to make it happen with nearly zero resources. Usually it's like, okay, you want to go to the moon and you have 5 pennies. How do you do? It's like, okay, that's not possible. And you're like, no, that's possible.
It's possible, exactly.
So, but that's the fun part of actually being a builder, I guess. I mean, I totally get that. Being there, keep being there. So I think it's you see that it happens, and I think that's the best part of it. And when it happens, it's like, damn it happens for real.
Exactly. I think it's only when you look back and you realize, oh my God, we did it, you know, and at the time it just feels like, oh my God, how, you know, how's this going to work? How's it going to happen? But you can look back for sure and say, we did that. Yeah.
I totally get what you're talking about. So you should be proud of that, 100%.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much for this chat. I really appreciate you giving the time and also your expertise. And I'm looking forward to the next episode and interview, like in 12 to 24 months, and see where we are with the industry.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Paola.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Thank you, Bindi.
Bye.